Brooke Grimsley is out today. Matthew Rocchio is in for Brooke, who's at the doctor's office. Joe Roderick has the bubble today, so maybe we'll get to hear from Joe during the course of this show. A lot going on. We're going to talk to Anthony Becht. He is the head coach, of course, of your St. Louis BattleHawks. We have a big announcement coming up about them. We're also going to talk to Jesse Rogers from ESPN coming up at about 10:20, and he's got a nice piece up about the Cubs' Kyle Tucker. He's also in Jupiter, so we'll talk about the Cardinals with our buddy Jesse, but we'll get things started down in Jupiter, Matthew, with the Cardinals talking about a six-man rotation, which I do not like the idea of. I know teams mess around with the idea, and the Dodgers have like a million starting pitchers, so they always talk about it. And if you have several Japanese guys, which the Dodgers do, they're used to a six-man rotation. But you talk about people like the Cardinals have, like Sonny Gray and Miles Mikolas predominantly, but Eric Petty has spent most of his career in a five-man rotation. These guys are creatures of habit. They're used to a five-man rotation. They're used to setting up their routine to pitch one day, take the next day off, and then it's weights, and then bullpens, and then pitching. And I think that the risk of throwing these guys off, the young and the old pitchers, is not worth having them cut down on their innings over the course of a season by using a six-man rotation. I think there are other ways to cut down on innings for pitchers.
I think it makes sense. And anytime you're throwing off pitchers, they're creatures of habit. Starting pitchers, goaltenders in all sports, they're weirdos.
Yeah.
So you got to treat them with kind of kid gloves at times. And by the way, we don't want to start this off in the wrong way. Good morning to everybody in the chat. Bubs, Dallas M, flute player 1978, who brought us the greatest Randy character anecdote that we've heard on this show. So very, very big good morning to him. Yeah, it's problematic. And for me, it's another show that the Cardinals can't make a decision, and it's another thing where it's about half measures, and they're trying to do everything by making this decision, but it's not making a decision is the problem. The reason why they're making this decision is because they can't make an actual decision, which is, cut somebody loose, make a trade, move Steven Matz to the bullpen because it just makes sense in the long run because of his injury history. Just make a decision instead of doing these half-measure things and probably making some mistakes in the long run.
Well, let's start with this. The Cardinals are very reluctant, maybe 100% reluctant at this stage of their existence to pay somebody to not play for them. So if it's cutting somebody like Fetty loose at $7.5 million or Mikolas loose at $17.5 million, they're not going to do that. That's just not who they are at this stage. They aren't going to eat that kind of money. They are worried about the depth of their starting pitching, and they've been burned by this as recently as last year in May. They had 4 starting pitchers. But when you think about what they have right now in their system, and this is at the major and minor league levels. Okay, so you've got Gray, Mikolas, Matz, Fetty, Palante, McGreevy. There's the potential 6 starters. You also have Matthew Liberatore, who should be in the starting rotation. You're stretching Gordon Graceffo back out at the minor league level. You've got Quinn Matthews, who should be here by May. You've got Tink Hence going down. You've got Roby. Hopefully he's healthy. You've got Ian Bedell, who's probably ticketed for an entire year at AAA. As far as I'm concerned, when you have 9 guys that are either in the majors or close to the majors, you could afford to get rid of one of them. And I would hope that with the need for pitching in Major League Baseball, that Eric Fetty would be a marketable commodity, and you could move on from him and get somebody to take on the entire $7.5 million and fit both McGreevy and Palante into your rotation to start the season.
I refuse to believe that Steven Matz's $11 million hasn't been tradable at the deadline.
They've tried it all offseason to trade Steven Matz because he's maxed out in the last 3 years with the Cardinals at something like 60 innings.
Yeah. It's more of like I think the leverage play at the deadline is different than the offseason. That's why I said I'm surprised they weren't able to do it at the deadline at any point. But I think it was because I think the reason why they don't maybe pull the trigger on that in this past deadline is because it was 3 months after May when they didn't have enough pitchers, and so that you're kind of it's reactive moves instead of looking to the future and being proactive. We've been talking about this for the last year.
Innings pitched for Steven Matz as a member of the Cardinals. 2022, 48 innings. 2023, 105 innings. 2024, 44 innings. If you're a team looking for a back of the rotation guy, what are you looking for most? Innings, right?
Yeah, consistency.
Yeah, you want a guy to be able to go to the post. And Steven Matz has started 10 games and then 17 and then 7 for the Cardinals. If you are another team, you want much more reliability than that. And that's why I think at this deadline, maybe Matz is a marketable commodity. But for the Cardinals right now, he serves them best in the bullpen.
Exactly. And that's the thing. These guys are all free agents to be.
Yeah.
These are not in your long-term view. And that's actually kind of my bigger point on the Cardinals, maybe not having some issues with decision-making. I think it gets back to the fact that it's not coincidental that they can't make a decision when the decision-making process is split between a guy who's not going to be here in 8 months and a guy who is going to be here for the long haul, but can't be making the decisions. And I continue to think that the split between John Mozeliak and Chaim Bloom, and just the fact of who's making the decisions this year, who's taking over, that has to be factoring into the fact that they're trying to keep a foot in both buckets, John Mozeliak term, and they're failing to do so.
Always with the Cardinals, follow the money though.
Yeah.
Right? Who are the highest paid starters? Who's starting opening day?
Sonny
the
Gray.
guy who's making $25.5 million. Who's probably going to start the second game? The guy who's making $17.5. Who's going to start the third game? Probably the guy who's making 11. And then who's going to start the fourth game? The guy who's making 7.5. Who's going to start the fifth game? The guy who's making $5 million. So,
and was your best starter last year?
Yeah,
and Andre Palante.
Right, exactly. So it's and Mike Matheny said this when he was manager, and things haven't changed since Mike was the manager. The contract plays with the Cardinals, and they definitely, if you just follow the money, it's easy to see how things work out.
Blues fan 94 in the chat, and then everybody, if you are watching right now on YouTube, jump into the chat. We'll be rolling through your chats the entire show. We have enough pitching in this organization. Michaelis and Matz need to be in the bullpen so we can allow these young pitchers to grow and improve for the organization's future. There was another comment earlier from Scott Hettenhausen.
I don't think that you put Miles Michaelis in the bullpen because he's the one pitcher on this staff that you can count on to give innings. And if you're going to try to preserve young arms during the course of the season, and the Cardinals are, even if they could move Matz and Fetty, and they aren't planning on winning this year, Miles Michaelis is a guy that can go to the post and give you 200 innings. And win or lose, and last couple of years it's been more lose, but he's a guy that can help with those innings to protect the bullpen. And the next day, let's say Miles Michaelis, or let's say that a guy like McGreevy would do what young pitchers do at some point and go 3 1/3. The next day, Michaelis can take you the hit. If your bullpen has to give you 6 one day, Michaelis can give you 7 the next. He might allow 6 runs, but at least he can give you the 7 innings. And you aren't worried about him. He's capable, he's durable, and it might not be a winning thing, but the Cardinals aren't planning on winning this year. So you have him there to protect your young pitchers.
You touched on two things there that Lynn Worthy touched on in his piece, talking about the 6-man rotation on stltoday.com. Check that out. It was fantastic, which is one, the overall fact that you have to kill innings this season and how do you get there. And one thing he's pointing out is not only do you have a guy like Sonny Gray, you and Brooke were just talking about how he slows down when you get into the hot days because of the sweating and things like that. And hopefully it's better with the jersey, but we know what he is late in seasons.
Yeah, he's been that his whole career.
Exactly. So we know he is late in seasons. Then you have an Andre Palante who was your best starter last year, but now has to continue to tick up that innings count from the 140 it was last year to make him a legitimate MLB starter, closer to 200. So he's got to add innings. Cardinals usually don't like adding 70 innings in a season to a guy, so he's not going to go all the way up to 200. And then if a Gordon Graceffo is going to start getting, or Michael McGreevy, I should say, is going to start getting time, he's not 100% used to the 5-day rotation because he's been in Memphis. And so he's also got to tick up that inning count. So there's going to be innings available for these guys, and you need Miles Michaelis to eat up some of those ones. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And the other thing you talked about as well is just, the youth factor and the Miles Michaelis factor, the experience factor. And Scott Hettenhausen brought that up here. The young pitchers will be starting next year. Shouldn't they get the experience now? I think there's something to be said for getting guys like Michael McGreevy who show you what they have at the end of a season like last year and saying you have to go now. I'm all for the young pitchers getting the time. I'm all for the young pitchers being in the starting rotation. The issue I have is that I just think this is a half measure because John Mozeliak in Katie Wu's piece, again, a great job by all the people down in Jupiter covering this story, had a completely different perspective, which is, they don't want to screw with their young pitchers. And I've been very vocal that they screwed up Thompson by moving him up and down and rotation, starter, even when he was having success in different roles. And so I don't want them to do that, but I do want to see the young starters get more time. And so I just hate that this is a half measure. I say go with a 5-man rotation and put more young guys in it. I think that's the best move for this season for the Cardinals' future.
And if you could find somebody to take Eric Fetty and then put Matz in the bullpen, bing, bang, boom. Then you've got Gray and Michaelis at the top. You can throw in McGreevy, who, by the way, threw 173 innings between St. Louis and Memphis last year.
That's bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah,
Wow.
and you get McGreevy in there, you get Palante in there, and if you want to get Quinn Matthews in, or more importantly, get Liberatore into the rotation because he's pitched well enough to be in the rotation this year, then all of a sudden, if you have Gray, Michaelis, Liberatore, who has pretty significant major league experience now, Palante and McGreevy, I'm fine with that rotation. And then if somebody does blow up and Steven Matz is in your bullpen, he's a guy capable of starting games for you.
Yeah, the Matthew Liberatore thing is also interesting because he's been arguably your most impressive pitcher outside maybe Quinn Matthews in spring so far. But we go back to what I was just talking about. You don't want to be putting these guys in swing roles and things like that because I don't think it's the best thing for their long-term development. So long-term, where do you think Matthew Liberatore profiles best? Brendan Schaefer, when he was sitting in your chair last on Friday, he pointed out kind of in that all-star version of Andrew Miller, that Cleveland version of Andrew Miller being an ideal projection for Matthew Liberatore. What are your thoughts on his ideal projection?
I think the game has changed so much that Andrew Miller, the starter that gave Boston and Miami and the Indians 5 innings, I think that is fine now. I think they expect that out of a guy like Liberatore. We tend to think that Andrew Miller did what he did in the playoffs all the time. He didn't
do that. No.
He wasn't coming out and giving them 4 1/3
it was kind of just that one
July
magic,
20th, right? Like he did in the playoffs. He does have that ability. But what's the hardest thing to find now in Major League Baseball? Why is it that people like Max Scherzer got $43 million contracts and Verlander got $43 million contracts, and you see $218 million go to Max Fried? What's the hardest thing to find? It's starting pitching. So if you have a guy that's capable of it and he can perform that job for you, you let him do that job, and then you find somebody else to do the secondary job.
Bubs actually had this up. Are these pitchers worth more as trade pieces during the offseason or at the deadline? And that's kind of what I was throwing about Steven Matz. I do think there is a legitimate, difference between dealing at that leverage point of the deadline. And I haven't been happy with the way the Cardinals have done it. Maybe 2 years ago when they said, we suck, we got to just ship it all out of here. That made sense. And last year you can kind of maybe forgive them for being in that medium point where they didn't know what to do considering where they were record-wise.
And last year, when you look at the way the starting pitching was going, you weren't going to trade Gray. You weren't going to trade Michaelis because of Gray, the no trade, Michaelis, the no trade, and the salaries. You couldn't trade Matz because he was hurt. You didn't want to trade Palante, and you traded for Eric Fetty. So that was the starter that you needed all year long. So you weren't in a position to trade away pitching at that point last year. The Cardinals, they got Fetty again to protect their young starting pitching. It was the same thought process that they had when they went out and got Lester and Happ a few years ago, and then all of a sudden those guys get hot and you wind up in a race for a division title. But ultimately, the Cardinals, the timing wasn't right. Do I wish this year that everything was aligned so that the young position players and the young pitchers were all going to be growing at the same time? Yeah, I wish that were the case. But as you said, they're having trouble making a decision to put a guy like Matz in the bullpen, and they're having trouble being aggressive enough to go out and find a taker for Eric Fetty. And again, I think they're scared of their shadow because of what's happened with players like Sandy Alcantara that they've moved. They want to find, what if this guy turns out to be great? They want to find out if guys can be great for them before they move on from them or make a decision to put them in the rotation.
And does that connect to how much they want to get these guys to pop like that so they can give them the 7-year 12 AAV contract early so they can lock them up and then everything looks a lot prettier on the books?
Well, they aren't going to sign the guy to the Max Fried contract or the Garrett Cole contract or even the short-term Verlander or Scherzer contracts. So yeah, if the Cardinals are going to give out a contract to a young pitcher, for example, right now,
this is why you want Quinn Matthews to sign 7 for 70.
I would do that. And if I don't know that I would go the higher AAV with a guy like McGreevy, but I would try to buy out a year of McGreevy's free agency too, because it's a bargain. And if it doesn't work out, kind of like when they had Paul DeYoung, it doesn't kill you. Okay, the house, is it? The horse is long dead, but the disconnect between the contract plays and we're building for the future and want to see the young guys is what's so frustrating about this organization. And it's two separate entities, right? It's the rotation where you gave Gray the contract, you gave Michaelis the contract, you gave Matz the contract, and the people that you're concerned about in the big concern right now would be Nolan Arenado, right? You couldn't trade him. You had him traded, and he didn't want to go because you've given, again, the no trade contract. But yeah, there is a definite disconnect here, and I get the frustration, but the timing just didn't work out to have you do what Pittsburgh has done over the years, or what Kansas City did for 30 years, or what the Cubs did when they had their young players. Although they did go out and sign free agent pitchers, that's what they did. But there's a reason for the disconnect, and it has to do with contractual obligations. And the Cardinals are obligated to keep people that they have under no trade contracts if they don't want to leave.
George Williams, you can never have enough starting pitching. There's always injuries. And yeah, that's true. And I think that's why I think people are kind of worried about whether or not they're starting these young guys in the minors or in Memphis, because that's one thing that Lynn Worthy pointed out multiple times, is that they don't have a lot of arms in Memphis if they go with this 6-man rotation idea. There's going to be injuries, but I also think there's also an argument for the 6-man rotation, because there's going to be injuries. You do want guys like Michael McGreevy hitting this year in the majors, so they're prepping like that.
And I want to get to this chat room comment from Ray. He said, let some of these young pitchers get their experiences in the minors and hopefully have success. Bad MLB experience is not necessarily better than good AAA experience. Well, McGreevy's done pretty much all he can at AAA. You aren't sending Palante down. You probably aren't sending Liberatore down. He's either going to be in your rotation or in your major league bullpen. So the three kids that you're talking about, and then Quinn Matthews is 24 and pitched 4 years at Stanford in high leverage situations for the Cardinal, and blew through the minors. He was a minor league pitcher of the year last year. He's had only good minor league experience. I don't think the Cardinals are in a situation with any of these kids, Palante, McGreevy, Liberatore, Matthews, those four specifically, where I feel like those guys would be being rushed if they started or in the first couple of months of the season found themselves at the major league level.
I think you could argue that Matthews would be a rush, but your point to his time at Stanford, with what he's shown in the spring, that's a rush I'm comfortable with. Yeah. I would argue they rushed. I would argue that they rushed Victor Scott to the majors last year,
and they rushed Johan Oviedo a few years ago.
There you go. That's a great name for who they rushed. And so yeah, I say, and again, push the envelope a little bit. That's one thing we never see this Cardinals team do, and I don't want to see stupid risks and things like that. And it's the Cardinals organization. I don't even know why I'm talking about taking a risk. This is why we're not going to see it, and I guess that's why. You heard Ali Marmol say yesterday to Lynn Worthy in the scrum on Twitter that they're going to make the decision. They're going to talk about it this afternoon, which is yesterday afternoon, and we expect to hear maybe a decision about this. Are you buying that this 6-man rotation talk is real and that they might actually go for it?
I am. I think it is a legitimate discussion, and Ali was going to talk to his staff about it, so I think it is legitimate. Okay, 2 questions that we need to answer here. Number one, you asked this question on our show plan. Is Victor Scott II going to lose the center field battle? No, he's not going to lose it, but he's also not going to win it. He's not going to be the Cardinal center fielder. And the reason is that Lars Nootbaar is going to play a lot of center field. They are more comfortable with Ciani sitting on the bench as a 4th outfielder, with Nootbaar in center, Burleson getting some time in left. They want Victor Scott to play every day, and the only way he can play every day is at AAA. So he's going to, by numbers and by performance, win the battle, but he's not going to be the Cardinal center fielder to start the season. I don't think. That's my prediction.
Yeah, that's even more disappointing, this entire 6-man rotation conversation. The guy's hitting like crazy. Like, again, you pushed him too hard last year. He goes down to the minors.
He did hit like crazy last year in spring training.
He did. You push him too far. He goes out of the minors. He fixes his swing, which is what you've been asking a lot of your young prospects to do, and some of them have been more successful at it than others. He fixes his swing, comes back, works obviously in the offseason, has another great spring, and more than that, he everything about what his player profile works for what you want. His bat's better than it was, and he's a great defensive player, which you need considering all the pitching we've talked about. I don't understand this decision in any way, shape, or form for the Cardinals right now.
Well, I think the skipper is looking more big picture, right or wrong. And I prefer to see Victor Scott leading off and playing center field for the Cardinals on opening day? Yeah. But I also understand how they think that the upside of Ciani is such that he deserves an opportunity. And the defense up the middle, I will never complain. And you're right. Scott is a terrific defensive center fielder. He was the best center fielder in all of minor league baseball 2 years ago. He won the Gold Glove. But Ciani was 2 innings away from being a Gold Glover at the major league level last year too. So if you tell me as a person that's running a major league team, I'm worried about defense up the middle, and that's why I have that player X playing, I would say that fine. I've seen too much winning by the Cardinals with defense up the middle for me to disagree with you.
All right, fair enough. We'll hit this Cardinals topic again on the other side, but we got to change things up, talk a little bit about some NL Central rivals, where we get to do it live with one of our favorites. He writes for the Cubs and the White Sox on ESPN, and that is Jesse Rogers, who joins us right now on the Randy Karraker Show, featuring Brooke Grimsley, who's out today, so I'm in the seat. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing, sir?
Good to be with you guys.
Hey, let's start with this. You have a great piece up right at the front page of ESPN.com about Kyle Tucker. And we were, before the show started, having a little debate about where he lands in the pantheon of Major League Baseball right now. He's way up there, isn't he? And your piece points that out. He's one of the best players in baseball.
He is. He's more tools than people think. And that was kind of the point of the piece, sort of introducing you to the next, we think, $400 million player, although these numbers are crazy. Who knows? I mean, Soto has set the bar for right fielders that's pretty high, but I had executives tell me that they think Tucker's just as good. He's certainly a better defender. He can run the bases. He's stolen 30, 25 bases in the past. I mean, last year he was on his way to an incredible season. In fact, he nearly broke the arbitration system. I wrote in the piece because they had to judge him based on a half season where he produced a 4.7 FWAR. I mean, his numbers were full season numbers for a half a year. And so they had to debate what he was actually worth. And they finally settled on $16.5 million. But I think he got lost a little bit in that Houston lineup. He's quiet. His personality is quiet, at least outwardly. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see him at Wrigley Field now in his platform season and leading a team that really desperately wants to make it back to the postseason while he's trying to get that big free agent contract. But in diving into his stuff, like, he's pretty mentally tough. And you have to be when you're the 5th overall pick and you produce every year. And he has a very unique swing, a very, very unique setup. They wouldn't teach it to players. But as I talked to his high school coach, he's had that unique kind of swing and stance since he was very young. And he's just glad that in this day and age, your swing can get messed with by many different people, hitting coaches, private hitting coaches, analytics people, and really they haven't touched his swing, and that's how he's become one of the best players in the league. So I think the Cubs are just going to let him be him. He's had a very, very quiet spring, but that's when you don't get paid. You get paid from April to September. So it was very interesting to dive into him and learning about him even as a young player in high school down in Tampa Bay.
Hey, Jesse, I like what the Cubs are putting out there. My only concern is what they have behind him. And today, when they opened the season in Japan, it was Bush at first base and Shaw at third. And I haven't seen those guys enough to know. Are they enough to protect a guy like Tucker as your number 4 and 5 guys?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the other way around. He's going to protect them, I think, finally. But yes, of course, he's going to need to have some protection. The good thing about Tucker is he'll take a walk. Now, walks don't drive in runs, but look, you don't want a guy swinging at pitches outside the strike zone. His walk rate has really skyrocketed over the last few years. So one way or another, Tucker's going to get on base. And if he's walking enough, they're eventually going to have to come into him. So I don't worry about his protection so much. His game is that good. I think he'll provide it for other guys. But the Cubs are no guarantee, right? If they were in the West or the East, I'm talking about any of those divisions, they'd be up against some juggernauts, but they're in the Central. They just have to be one game better than the Brewers, which is easier said than done, and better than the Cardinals and Reds as well. They're good enough to do that. But they're no guarantee to do that. Tucker certainly helps, and that's why they gave up a lot for him. But I really don't worry about his game, whether he has the protection or not. I think he can produce. He's done it. His high school coach told me how mentally tough he is, something you don't necessarily think about him because he is so mild-mannered. But I think the guys around him need to perform. And let's see if he can elevate the other ones in the lineup. The one guy to watch is Pete Crow-Armstrong. He's just oozing of talent right now. And if he could bring it all to sort of fruition at the major league level like he has at other levels, then watch out. He'll be a dynamic player in the NL Central.
Well, Jesse, before we brought you on, we were just talking about Cardinal dysfunction. So your comment in there doesn't really surprise me, but it seems like you're expecting just a two-team race in the NL Central for most of this season.
No, I'd include the Reds in there as well. I think Francona will elevate. I'm just never going to count out Milwaukee. Look, St. Louis is a really interesting situation. They've talked about a reset, but it really hasn't come at the major league level. I do think it's coming this July. Closers are so valuable in July. So if Helsley continues on his game, you're going to get a ton for him. But what's interesting is you have a lot of veteran pieces there. What if they have a good first half? But I do think, and you mentioned it before I came on, I think Marmol his marching orders are to give runway to young players, to judge the young players, maybe even at the cost of games in the win-loss column. I think the worst thing that can happen to the St. Louis Brass, Mozeliak and Heimblum, is if the Cardinals are on the edges of any kind of a race, let alone in the race, because you can't break up a team that's in the race, especially in St. Louis. But their DNA this season is to break up this team. I'm surprised they didn't do it a little bit more in the offseason. Obviously, we'll see what happens with Arenado. But it's a weird situation, a veteran team that could get off to a good start, but a team that wants to give runway to young players and trade some of those veterans come July. The standings, once the season start, dictate what you do in July. But their first thought is to move on from some guys in July. We'll see what the win-loss record looks like to allow them to do that or not.
And Jesse, I think we need to, as a fan base here, because we have not been through a rebuild or a reset. But so we need to understand that if half of these guys, if Nootbaar, Scott, Ciani, Walker, Gorman, Donovan, the two catchers, if half of those guys work out, that's a home run for the Cardinals. The anomaly in baseball recently has been the Cubs that won in 2016 because pretty much every one of those prospects worked out. But it won't shock me, and I don't think it should shock anybody if a guy like Jordan Walker doesn't work out, if he's a washout, because that's the way baseball goes, right? About if you get half of your prospects to work out and be starters, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think in this stage, what you're trying to do is play the numbers game, as you said. If 10% of all prospects make it, you want 100 prospects, not 10. So I think in the next 12 months, that's what you're going to be seeing, trying out the ones you guys have there, seeing who's there for the long term, and then acquiring a few others at opportune times, one of them being this July. But again, the wrench could be, what if they get off to a good start? The first time they're the underdogs, maybe the second time in 20 years, meaning last year and this year. What if they get off to a good start? You only lost Goldschmidt off a veteran team. I mean, I have my doubts about that veteran pitching staff, but Michaelis is committed to being better than last year. He's in a free agent year. Matz is still there. Obviously, Sonny Gray's top of the rotation kind of guy. So that's where it gets interesting. What if they do play well early? Mm-hmm. But they might torpedo that by the amount of playing time they give to the young players and the runway they give. You might see guys with 100+ at bats hitting 150 and still in the lineup. And so that will assure them of their path in July. So I think what you're saying is right. They want to just get as many prospects out there as they can to see who sticks and then acquire a few more. I'm telling you, Ryan Helsley, if he's pitching well, there's always a contender that wants a closer, or two or three of them. He could net you a haul in July. Closers don't get you anything in December, but they get you a lot in July.
Jesse, in your time in Chicago, you've seen obviously the Cubs go through ups and downs, rebuild, reset, and those kind of things. And you've seen another team on the other side of town just kind of be mired in badness for so long. as we're here in St. Louis, looking at a team that has to reset and rebuild, are there things you see now between watching a successful rebuild and a complete failure across a decade plus, where you say, okay, these are the red flags you have to watch for as a baseball fan base when your team's resetting, for if there's reason for hope or reason for maybe some negativity?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'll work backwards. One thing that I learned from the White Sox and the Cubs is that whatever your rebuild looks like, you need to finish it off. Meaning you are probably not, even the Cubs team that you mentioned was mostly homegrown. They added John Lester. They added Ben Zobrist. Rebuilds are not going to come to fruition just homegrown. It's not. So again, working backwards, the White Sox didn't finish off the rebuild. They thought they had enough internally. You don't. First of all, you'll never have enough experience if they're all coming up together. Who's going to show them the way through the playoffs and things like that? So the White Sox didn't finish off the rebuild. The Cubs did. I think the other lesson is early on, really don't worry about anything but acquiring talent. Like I said, you don't want 10 prospects. You want 100 prospects, because a few of them are gonna make it. I do think that as you move along, you have to ask a couple questions, especially as you're handing out money to young players, because that's one thing you want to lock up young players. Who loves the game and who's just really talented? I think that is something front offices are asking more and more as they do tie up, whether it be free agents or young players, to these long-term deals. It's a cliche, but there's some truth. Once a guy gets paid, you don't know what he's going to be. So as you go through a rebuild and maybe you hand out some money to a young player, you better know that he loves the game as much as you think he does, because there are guys that are talented or love the game a little bit, but not enough to sustain a 10 to 15 year career. So those are a couple of things I think about. And then the last thing I'd think about would be roster construction. As much as you're just gathering talent, make sure you have a balanced lineup as you work through this. Make sure you have lefty pitching, righty pitching. Like, as they all come together, you don't only stuck. The White Sox, I think, had a road bump because they were way too right-handed, and then they're like, "Wait a minute, this is our contending team. How are we going to get left-handed?" So I think roster construction as you grow a team is important. Finishing off a rebuild, handing out money to the right players long-term are all important things to think about. And then there are some guys you're just going to use and move on from. And I think that, you have to recognize who those guys are and who the long-term core pieces are. So those are some of the things off the top of my head.
You bring up a guy who can help lead a young team through the playoffs, talented, loves the game. To me, you're describing Wilson Contreras.
Yeah. See, the problem with the Cubs is as they turned over their roster to a younger team, they weren't sure if he was the right guy to lead them through it. The negative way of saying it is he was emotional and hot-headed and stuff. I didn't view it that way. I think he wore emotions on his sleeve. He wanted to win. He wanted to get the team there. But, here's a weird comparison. Pedro Grifol, the former manager of the White Sox, was miscast as the White Sox manager, especially last year. He was so earnest, but last year they were starting over. Wilson is very earnest. So I think the Cubs felt like maybe that's not the right fit for a young team. The Cardinals might end up viewing it the same way, but it's not just him. There's a lot of those guys. I mean, Arenado's not the right fit for a young team, right? We pretty much know he's not going to end his career there. So that's where you have to make the right decisions for players in the moment that they're in and the demeanor that they have and things like that. And so, look, I think Nolan, Helsley, Wilson Contreras, again, a lot of these guys have no trade clauses. Michaelis, if the deal's right, these guys are going to get moved. They're just simply going to get moved. And that's what the Cardinals are facing.
What do you think the story of the 2025 Cardinals is?
I think the story is just they're not going to contend. And I don't want to say they're doing everything not to contend. Marmol's going to try to win every game. But his marching orders are to see who the long-term pieces are. I'll give Mozeliak credit. He is not hidden from this. And this is, again, when you can be transparent about what you're doing, you can also justify why you didn't spend a lot of money in free agency. Why would we spend money when we're just trying to see what the long-term pieces are here? So the transparency at least explains not spending a lot of money, even if you don't like it. I think the story is exactly what they're saying. This is a reset, and there's going to be very few veterans, in my opinion, left on this team 4 or 5 months from now, as long as they're tradable. Like if they're having crappy years, that's a different story. So to me, the storyline is really the turnover this team is going to see over the next 4 to 6 months.
Jesse, we recommend everybody go to ESPN.com and check out your piece on Kyle Tucker and read all of your great work. You're always fantastic, and we know you're making the rounds and you're busy today. We appreciate your time, sir. Good to see your face, and we will see you here in St. Louis during the season.
You got it. Great to see you. I will be there for opening day. They don't send me to New York or Houston or LA. They send me to St. Louis for opening day. So I'll see you next week.
Little holiday here. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Take care.
And I will say in that piece, by the way, Jake Woodford mentioned in the second graph of the piece right out of the gate, because, man, did they absolutely just stack talent at Kyle Tucker's high school. Ridiculous.
And by the way, the Cardinals take on the Marlins today, and you can check out Cards Hub 365 this afternoon. It's brought to you by Gray Bar. Cards Hub 365 coming your way at 3 o'clock right here on Sports Hub STL on the YouTube page. And we have it right here on the Sports Hub STL YouTube page after the Cards take on the Marlins. You can also get the show on demand from YouTube following the live broadcast, as well as on Apple, Spotify, or any other major podcast outlet. Cards Hub 365, daily Cardinals content right here on Sports Hub STL, powered by Gray Bar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs. Should we give continue the list of starting pitchers in Major League Baseball?
Oh yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead. Before we get to our interview with Coach Becht, let's go ahead and throw up that.
So I know we were having a discussion about where Sonny Gray falls among opening day starters in Major League Baseball, and there you have it. I gave my bottom 5 yesterday, and now 25 through 21. My 25th best opening day starter in Major League Baseball is the Angels' Yusei Kikuchi. Kyle McClanahan of the Rays, 24. Freddie Peralta of the Brewers, 23. Hunter Green of the Reds. From a talent standpoint, top 15. From a production standpoint so far, number 22. And then Shaden Bieber making the comeback from the injury.
You're telling me that the Cardinals are going to finish behind a team, or 2 teams, I should say, in the standings this year, the NL Central, who have bottom 10 opening day starters?
Well, no.
I don't like that.
No, here's the thing. I don't know that your opening day starter generally determines where you're going to finish at the end of the season.
Doesn't it dictate, the quality of the top, 2 or 3 spots of your pitching staff?
It should, but then you got Clay Holmes starting for the Mets, who are going to be pretty good, and he's only made 4 major league starts, so it's difficult. So last year, Sonny Gray was hurt for the Cardinals, and Michaelis started. Granted, they only won 83 games, but if your opening day starter is injured, then I think that you have to consider that when you're making a determination about how a team is going to finish.
That's fair. I also do want to say, no Sonny Gray in this list yet for the Cardinals. Not in the bottom 10.
Sonny Gray is going to be just fine.
Okay.
Sonny Gray is, we've talked about it. Sonny Gray he's a nice pitcher to have. So
that's
right?
Yeah. That's a compliment coming from Randy Karraker.
Yeah. Well, he's a good guy to have on your staff. Hey, you know what? Sports Hub STL is excited to announce that we're going to be having a weekly BattleHawks show and post-game shows after each game this season. BattleHawks coverage is brought to you here on Sports Hub STL by Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken. With the new Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken BattleHawks box, you can score up to 30% off BattleHawks tickets, plus get 4 of their famous breast strips, yum, and a side of potato wedges for just $8.99, only at Lee's Famous for Chicken. And we get an opportunity to hear from the head coach of your St. Louis BattleHawks, Anthony Becht. Joining us on the Randy Karraker Show, featuring Brooke Grimsley, is the head coach of the St. Louis BattleHawks, Anthony Becht. Coach, training camp underway. Great to have you with us. How you doing?
Oh, thanks, Randy. Brooke, great to be on. It's been great. I love this league. I love this opportunity. I love that it's my 3rd year, and we've grown every single year we've had this football team. So, obviously, just like other teams, we have a lot of obstacles that we're overcoming to get to the season. But, man, really feel good about where we're at and excited to put a great product on the field for 2025.
And we're excited to serve your incredible fan base with a lot of BattleHawks coverage here at Sports Hub STL. And I know that you're really proud of the fan base that the BattleHawks have built in St. Louis, and it'll be fun for your organization and us to serve them as much as they want to be served.
Yeah, I love that. You know how I feel about the fan base. I really have a lot of admiration for, obviously you guys that cover us and give the folks at home, the fans, a little bit about what we're doing and how we're trying to be great. And of course, for us, we're so appreciative of every single fan that comes out every single year. We're looking for new fans to come out. We're looking for the old fans to come out. We've had a winning product the last 2 seasons, and we want to take those steps to add on to last season after we got to the playoffs and weren't able to get past San Antonio. But we really feel good about it. And again, we're excited about this roster, and we're going to narrow that roster down here on Wednesday night. And we're going to have this 50-man roster ready to go.
Speaking of the roster, we're going to have a new quarterback this year for the BattleHawks. So how is that competition going? And who are the 3 quarterback candidates that you have currently right now for the fans to get to know?
Yeah, so a familiar face, Manny Wilkins, is back. He was our backup the last 2 years, knows the system. Really, guy has the ability to come in and, really take it by the stranglehold and take charge and take those steps, looking for an opportunity. But we also brought in other competition, and we've opened it up every day. We've switched it. Max Duggan is a player that took TCU to the national championship a few years ago, got drafted by the Chargers, and then played a second season with them with Coach Harbaugh, and then was released. Great opportunity for him. Again, understanding, learning the offensive system, the reads, the checks, the protections, all these things will help him grow and ultimately, allow him to be on the field. And he's had a great camp. And then the third guy is Chevin Cadero, and he's a young quarterback that came out of 2023 from San Jose State. He's got a ton of big-time records with the WAC conference or Mountain Conference, whatever that one's called out west. But, he really dazzled the fan base and had a really successful college campaign. And he's electric with the ball in his hand. He's learning every day. Again, a guy that's learning the college system, trying to get acclimated to the pros. So every day, guys, they've had some great days, and we are truly allowing these guys to practice every single day with the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, see how they react, see how they go, and it's been really going well.
And Anthony, you mentioned that Manny Wilkins knows the system, having played in it for 2 years. But you have a new offensive coordinator, Bruce Gradkowski. Congratulations to him. Goes to the NFL with the Lions. So how have you been able to maintain the same system?
Yeah, no question. So, obviously, yes, it's great that our coaches get to excel and take their talents to the NFL. And Bruce is with the Detroit Lions, like you said. Phil McGegan was with our program last year as a receiver coach. Phil McGegan's got a ton of NFL and college experience. As a matter of fact, he shared a tiny cubicle with a guy named Ben Johnson with the Dolphins for 3.5 years. So those guys grind it. They know how to come through. Good mindset. Quite frankly, all of my coaches could have been the coordinators. I could have called the plays, but I think it's about opportunities for guys. And Phil, this is his first true opportunity in a pro level to call the plays, just like it was Bruce's first year 2 years ago. So, really excited about it. The system in general is the same. And obviously all coordinators have their touches in verbiage, formations, movements, and things of that nature. Everything's about simplifying, right? So we don't have a lot of time in training camp. How can we get everything across, keep the bare bones of it, and then kind of add some things to help our guys play faster? And I think Phil and really the whole offensive staff has done a phenomenal job.
This will be a kind of a tough question, but I know that A.J. McCarron was a fan favorite. How hard was it to move on from him being the quarterback?
Yeah, wow. I love AJ so much. AJ was always a year-to-year thing for us. I thought it was important when I got into this league to really establish ourselves as a team. And, if we're spending a lot of time at a quarterback position, it's going to be hard for us to win. And AJ's a guy, had a ton of experience, an older player. And I wanted to get him back in the league. I wanted to help him get back in the league, utilize the platform. And after year one, it was phenomenal. 7 games, got himself with the Bengals for the in-season. So just, really proud about that for him. And then year 2 is another conversation. Okay, hey, he had something to prove, chip on his shoulder. We all had some, a lot of players back in year 2. It was like, all right, let's run it back again and let's go do this thing. And, he got nicked up at the end of the season, fought through injury, one of the toughest competitors I've ever coached. And, we just came up short. And then after the season, it was really about, okay, we're doing this now for 2 years. What direction we want to go as far as what this league's about, opportunities. And I just wanted to open it up, to some new faces, and really thankful for AJ. I think there's a lot of things that may have gone down or he said, she said. At the end of the day, totally respect AJ. And, I'm glad and thankful we had 2 years with him. And hopefully he's a fan at heart on back home with his family. But, just a highly successful person on and off the field.
Coach, you had a really good, really talented defense last year. What are some of the changes that you've experienced defensively? Who are some of the new guys that we'll be able to enjoy watching this year?
Yeah, man, so excited. We're always trying to improve, Randy. So, again, we got our returning safeties back. We also bring back our returning starting safeties from 2 years ago that went to the NFL, and Nate Metters and Lucas Dennis. So now you're talking about 4 all-conference players at the safety position. So just pumped up about that. Our pass rushers are back from last year. Really added some depth and some strength to our internal defensive line. That's been a 2.5 year kind of process, finding the right fits. And I feel like we've got those pieces now that really have, been able to stop the run in practice, do some good things in our scrimmages. And, we have Seabass and Chris Payton-Jones at the cornerback position. But again, how do we get better? We added some length. We added some speed. We added some NFL preseason experience, along with adding a linebacker to go along with a very good linebacker returning class that we had. So, listen, this defense will be improved. It was really good last year. I think we were like top 3 and total yards given up, and it was really close within 20 yards of us being number 1. So we should be better. And quite frankly, as our offense grows, I love to say we're going to hit the ground running, but we know even with the best quarterback in the last 2 years, it took us some time. But we feel good about where we're at, where we're going, and the direction of this team. And I think overall we have a good team. So that'll bode well for us going into the season on offense, special teams, and defense.
Looking at the schedule, and of course you can get some of those tickets, but I'm looking at the schedule and I see May 11th. You guys will be facing the Memphis Showboats, and you'll be facing a familiar face on the other side. Coaching-wise, Ken Wisenhunt will be the head coach at the Memphis Showboats this year, and you played for him back in Arizona.
I did. Well, even before that, he was my rookie tight end coach with the Jets. So that was a great experience. Learned a lot from him coming in as a first-round draft pick. A young, raw tight end, kind of looking and trying to find his way, and quite frankly, thrust it into a role where you had to play now. And there was a lot of pressure, and he helped me through a lot of those things. And it was tough sledding. It was a hard first year for me. I had a little nicked up injury, played through it, and then 8 or so years later, he becomes the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, like you said. And I he brought me in the year after they went to the Super Bowl. We made a great run into the second round of the playoffs after that. And look, he's going to be great for our league. He's a great teacher. I think, for him, on the back end of his career, he just wants to give back with all the knowledge and experience that he brought. So it's a great name for us, great name for Memphis. I believe he lives in Nashville area. So, relatively close to that situation. So it's great for the league, and it's good to see a good coach come in and really make this league even better.
Hey, Anthony, you have a unique perspective that practically nobody else has about football, in that you are involved with the UFL. You're involved with the NFL as a preseason broadcaster with the Jets, and you have a son that's playing college football. So every type of football you're aware of. And so I'm going to ask this question. When Dick Vermeil was the head coach of the Rams here, he never used the word team. He always used the word program. This guy will fit in well with our program. And so it wasn't a 1 year thing. He literally built a program. There was always somebody to plug in the next year if a free agent left. In any level of football, can you build a program anymore?
Well, you can with us, because everybody makes the same amount of money, and everybody's got a chip on their shoulder. Now, we don't have the year-round process like the NFL does. We don't have OTAs. We don't have the ability to get together and put things together. So the key component is building a culture in a month of training camp. And it's like, oh, that's impossible. How do you do that? I feel like we have certain ways that we do things here. One, with bringing back 37 guys that were on the roster last year. We have 27 new players. So now it's, again, I always allow my players to police their team. And the guys that have been here a year or 2 years, they understand the culture and the standard that's set. And quite frankly, that's set every single day by me. The messaging is very direct, it's very consistent, and it's very clear. And if guys don't want to buy into that, then they can go try and play somewhere else. And obviously those things are tough in these leagues, because all these players have spots, and there's just not enough teams. So, we just try to expedite that process by just staying on the staff, staying on the team. And that's really my job. I'm not a play caller. So, every day is important to me. Every day, the culture is important to me, the standard, making sure I don't let anything slide in the cracks because of the limited time we have. And then game day situationally being great. I really do, take a lot of passion and pride in situational football, making sure our guys are clear and we understand. And then on game day, being on top of all those scenarios and situations that can come up so that I don't lose a game for our football team. And, we see that every year in college and pros every week, really, during the season. That does happen. So, and of course, you're right. I do get the full gamut on the Jets with the NFL side. It's 365 football for me, which is great. And of course, my son, who I'm proud of, and heading into his third redshirt junior year, his third year starting. So it's been a full circle thing for me, and really just humbled and really accepting of all the roles that I do have.
And it seems unusual. You mentioned bringing 37 guys back. With the transfer portal in college and with free agency in the NFL, and the way that the UFL is, 37 veteran players coming back and 27 new guys. That's a pretty good percentage for any level of football with your roster to bring back. Yeah,
no doubt. And those 27 players, that we don't draft those guys. Those guys are free agency, so it's recruiting. I call them. Other teams are calling them. We're trying to, wait for them. Are they going to sign in the NFL or a futures contract? Maybe talk them out of a futures contract if it makes sense to come in our league, so that other teams are open to signing them after our season. So again, there's a good mix of college. There's a good mix of pro. But again, the players are hungry. And even though we have 37 guys returning, it doesn't mean 37 guys are making the team. Mm-hmm. Everybody, all positions are up for competition. And as we narrow it down, today is one of 3 practices left. So we will cut the roster down from 64 to 50 after our scrimmage against Arlington on Wednesday. And we're rocking and rolling. We play early, a couple of days off, and then we're going to start our weekly prep for Houston as we go on the road and open it up for the league on Friday night, the 28th at Houston.
You mentioned your son, and we have to talk about Rocco because he has really made a name for himself in college football. I was watching the Pop-Tart Bowl, and he was named the Pop-Tart Bowl MVP. He's been excellent, and I'm excited to see what he does this season. What is that like for you? You talked about, of course, being so proud. Of course you are, but what is it like? Are you like coach, dad in certain moments? Does he call you for some coaching advice, or how does that all go down?
Well, thank you so much for that. Just really surreal, number one, for me. I know how hard it is to play at the highest level in college and at the next level, but when you're a quarterback, it's a little different. His maturity and growth and his just professionalism throughout this process. I will say that he works extremely hard. He understands. We talk every night. We've talked every night since he left me in high school. It's important. He understands. He gets it. I don't bog him down with a lot of misinformation. He's got a great coaching staff. You talk about culture setters. Matt Campbell is a guy that has done that. And that's a big reason why we chose Iowa State, and just the perfect place for him. He learns in a pro style system that's very transparent and very adaptable to the next level. And he's leading his team, last year, 11 wins, most in program history, over 100 plus years of football at Iowa State. So it's been awesome. I love it. It's great for him, and he continues to just put his head down, and he's a great team player, a great leader, and just proud to watch him, carve his journey out. And I am a helpless father in the stands. I can't control anything. I can't talk to him. There's no signaling on the side. I can't do anything. So I'm at the mercy of whatever happens, but have definitely, tried to guide him and give him the tools that he needs so that ultimately he can carve out his own journey.
Anthony, a couple of rules changes in the UFL, another tweak to the kickoff rule, which I love. I'm so glad the NFL adopted the basis of the UFL's rule. But the one that I love the super challenge. I don't know why the NFL hasn't adopted this. I love the super challenge that you have in the UFL, and that you'll have a second one now where you can challenge anything. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's huge. I was an advocate for that, the last 2 years, because there's really no science behind the first and one flag. You're trying to save it, but you also want to make sure you use it at a time. Like, is it a difference maker? And you're pulling and tugging, and then you're at the mercy of the video screen, at the fields, where sometimes, I think we had a different video person every week at St. Louis running the big board. So, it's hard, so coaches, I try to get a lot of information. We do look at certain things in certain scenarios where there's a high probability of potential challenges. And but now having another one, if you get it right, we'll feel good about, hey, we're going to use it when we see it and need it. And if we feel great about it, then hell yeah, that's an advantage for us to get the other one. And now we can save that other one for a crucial moment at the end of the game, or really whenever it comes up. So yeah, I think it should come to the NFL to be able to challenge anything. Like if you miss the penalty, we can challenge it. Those things are really cool for us. But again, it's very difficult for a head coach, when we don't have every single type of technology, but enough to try to make those calls and get it right. So, again, try my best on that, but nice to have two if we do win the first one.
And that almost allowed you to win that playoff game last year, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, just being on it, it's a collaborative effort. We have two coaches in the booth. We always ask the defensive coach to watch the offense and vice versa, just in case we miss something or something's there. But there are critical plays, critical moments where you got to be on it. And I felt for the most part, we did really good with it. So it's not an exact science. We try to get it as best as possible. If I was watching the game on TV as I was calling it, I feel a lot better about it. But unfortunately, I can only use my two eyes, which I'd like to think are getting a little older, but still sharp enough.
All right, Anthony, one more thing. And I've done this for a long time. I've never asked this question of a coach at any level, baseball manager, football coach. How fired up are you about your new turf?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was just shocked when I went out there in the off season and saw what, the folks at St. Louis at the Dome had done. It's really phenomenal. I mean, that turf is next level. I believe it's the same turf as what Mizzou has at their university. So really excited. And then the lights. I mean, to have the ability now to have better lighting, pure lighting, LED lighting can be turned on and off at the flick of a button. We can do light shows, introductions. I think it makes it even for a better fan experience. And then aesthetically watching the game on TV. Although I did like the turf and a feel, it did look a little off on TV. So I think right now that's going to look even better for us. So there's no doubt we're excited, and it's going to keep us healthier, right? Because it is the highest level turf that's out there. You always would love grass, but we also love playing in a dome in neutral weather conditions every single week. Well, actually 6 weeks instead of 5 this year. So again, we're going to try to go undefeated at home like we did last year in the regular season. We do have that extra game, and of course, the goal is to get to the playoffs again and win a championship.
And that opener, that home opener right around the corner, the overall opener right around the corner, and tickets are available, and we can't wait, A, to watch your team play, and B, to be involved and to have a BattleHawks show every week here on Sports Hub STL, and then we'll have post-game shows as well.
Yeah, I love it. April 6th, Sunday, we got San Antonio at home. We need everybody. Those first games at home are usually huge. I just ask the folks out there, give it a try if you haven't. It is a cheap ticket, and it's a fun time. You guys have been there. I know you guys will speak on it. I think I love walking out of the tunnel to see what we got, and it's always been spectacular.
Coach, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon, and we'll see you at that opener.
Thanks, guys. Go BattleHawks.
That's Anthony Becht from yesterday. Brooke and I recorded that interview, and our BattleHawks coverage is going to be brought to you by Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken with the new Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken BattleHawks box. There it is, and it looks absolutely delicious.
That looks
You
incredible.
can score up to 30% off BattleHawks tickets, plus get 4 of their famous breast strips and a side of potato wedges. Matthew loves potato
I want
wedges.
potato wedges. Also, those look like seasoned potato wedges.
Yeah,
I got to
delicious.
get me some Lee's Famous Recipe chicken. Come on.
And that's just $8.99 for the BattleHawks box, only at Lee's Famous for Chicken.
And then you can try to show us. I was looking at the screen exactly like this because that looks like an extremely good. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I want the potato wedges. Potato wedges need to be in more restaurants. Go Lee's for being awesome.
Hey, are you subscribed yet to our YouTube page? And are you getting our newsletter? You need to subscribe, and you need to go to sportshubstl.com and sign up for the new Hub newsletter. Sent to your inbox twice a week, and the first one is out. And anytime St. Louis sports news breaks, you'll be the first to know about Sports Hub STL events and merchandise. Get exclusive content and prize opportunities and more. And while you're on the site, check out all the St. Louis sports content, including game recaps, programming highlights, sports news and opinion, gambling tips, and more. It's all on the website at sportshubstl.com. And we want to hear from you on the chat, as we heard from Anthony Becht, and we talked a little bit about the Cardinals in a 6-man rotation, and the Blues are in action tonight. They're at Nashville. All 3 teams battling for that final wild card spot in the Western Conference are playing tonight. The Flames are taking on the Islanders, and Winnipeg is at Vancouver. Calgary lost last night at Toronto to Craig Berube's Maple Leafs 6-2. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate the help.
I just hope the Blues keep on winning, because I don't know if the wider audience has known this, but if you do watch our post game shows, you will know that Sports Hub STL's own Thomas Welch on a Blues post game from a last week said he would shave his head or cut off his pinky. I think it's cut off his pinky, but he says it's shave his head.
Okay.
I need to go back and get the audio if the Blues actually do make the playoffs.
Oh.
So one way or another, I want the Blues to make the playoffs, because if we're posting a video of one of our contributors getting their head shaved, or again, pinky cut off, which I believe should be the bet, I'm 100% for it. So I love what the Blues are doing. Obviously, the offense is kicking up. Jordan Kyrou with, I think, the second Blue ever to have back-to-back games with 3 points in an actual day back-to-back like that, including the hat trick. He's been incredible this year. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the Buchnevich, Thomas, and Neighbors line. Neighbors with a big goal again in that game. So the offense is kicking up, but at the same time, I am starting to be a little bit worried. And I know this is like the very first conversation we had about the Blues on Sports Hub STL was our confidence in Jordan Binnington. But honestly, the numbers for both HOFer, the Hall of Famer, and Joel Hofer, and Jordan Binnington, that actually has kind of worried me over the last couple of weeks. And I'm so glad that Thomas made that. Great Photoshop job by Thomas on that one there. So yes, I hope they make the playoffs, but I am actually starting to worry about the goaltending and not the offense, which I think is the first time I could say that this year.
I would be interested to see a matchup in the playoffs of Jordan Binnington of the Blues and Connor Hellebuck of the Jets. Jordan Binnington plays big in the big moments, and I think that'd be an interesting series. And I would think that if the Blues do make the playoffs, they're going to do so because they're hot coming in. And I don't think that that's a team that a team like Winnipeg wants to see at all.
No, I'll agree with you on that one right now. And obviously, I think the Colton Parayko aspect, the fact that the defense, it hasn't fallen apart, but I think maybe that's what I have to factor into the discussion about what the numbers around Hofer and Binnington is, that your 1A defender it just is gone now.
Yeah.
And we know this year that's been the thing that everyone has finally agreed to, is that Colton Parayko is a legitimate defender. Even if you don't like his style, you cannot deny that he is an A1 defender in the NHL. And so to lose that, I think you have to factor that in. But overall, I think the defense has been pretty good despite losing Parayko, and that could be, a feather in your cap going forward.
Parayko will be back for the playoffs.
He will be, exactly. So you think about the experience that these guys get having to play without him. I mean, Nick Leddy, I don't think anyone would have expected the production that you've gotten from him in the last 2 weeks.
I'm not sure he would have.
Yeah, that's fair. We're getting a lot of text here in the chat. Jeff Katubi says the Blues are his pinky team. Not great. Eric Cleveland, from what I've heard in the past, Mr. Stillman loses money unless making the playoffs. Hope for his sake and the money he invests in the team that the Blues make the playoffs.
And that is not the case anymore. Chris Zimmerman has told me on multiple occasions that the Blues do not require a playoff trip to be in the black anymore. It used to be that was the case, but not anymore. And by the way, Tom Stillman doesn't own this team by himself. It's a group that includes you've got the Taylor family that's and Carolyn Kindle just bought in one of the daughters in the Taylor family. You've got the folks from Worldwide, Dave Stewart and Jim Cavanaugh. They're in the ownership group. The Danforth family is in the ownership group. It's a wide variety of St. Louisans that have taken it upon themselves to invest in the franchise, but they've turned it into a decent business proposition. I think it was for the first 51 years that the Blues never made money, and now they do.
Yeah, and honestly, good timing considering you might have to, maybe not this year because it looks like they might make a run, but you were looking like you might have to bite the bullet on a couple non-playoff years. And 10, 15 years ago, the discussions that would have led to in free agencies, in contract years, in the next 5 years, it would have changed those conversations for the Blues organization. But now you can reset, maybe miss the playoffs a year or two, and let these guys grow. Get guys like Dalibor Dvorsky and
Theo Lindstein.
Thank you.
You're thinking of Snuggerud.
Otto Stenberg and Jimmy Snuggerud. I was trying to think of Stenberg, and then you got Lindstein on me. Jimmy Snuggerud. Get these guys going and properly in place, and it doesn't change the fact that in 2 or 3 years you can still give Jake Neighbors the big deal. And I think that's a big thing going forward, and why that's such a big deal that isn't the case anymore, and why that ownership group is so incredible. Rip it up cards.
By the way, I want to make one more point. Yesterday, The Athletic had a ranking of all NHL owners, and Stillman came in 5th of all the owners in the NHL in terms of spending money reaching out to fans and being available for fans, stability of the franchise, winning the overall score. He was fifth.
And yeah, he deserves that. Rip It Up Cards is the station going to have BattleHawks post-game shows. Caw! Yes, we will be, of course, that Lee's chicken deal that looks so good. John Red, by the way, chimed in and said that Lee's chicken deal does look good. Is because we will be having the post-game shows right here on Sports Hub STL. Make sure that right now, while you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe, hit the little bell button. That way, every time we do go live, whether it's for BattleHawks, Cardinals, Blues, City going forward, you'll get a little ding on your phone. It'll let you know, hey, Sports Hub STL is going live. And that way you're right there for all of our BattleHawks post games and all of our post game shows.
This one on the chat line, contract plays equals nonsense. I didn't wrongly give Michaelis a raise for the season when he was already under contract, nor did I follow that mistake up with a terrible early 2-year contract. Mo did. Well, I'm just telling you what they do. And their philosophy is, apparently, because it's been said from internally in the past, that they are the ones that have the contract play. It's not us. It's not you. It's them. They decide that if they give somebody a big contract, they want to try to justify that deal. How long did they go down the line with Matt Carpenter, paying him a bunch of money?
Oh, geez. YouTube users not done, Randy. The Cardinals have had better starting pitching for many years. They just wasn't smart enough. They wasn't smart enough to start them. Ulterior motives and bad trades. Yes, front office issues. I'm pretty sure. Criticize the team all you want. Criticize the decisions all you want. I'm pretty sure that the motives for this team has been that they think the decisions are to win more baseball games or to set up the team better. You might not agree with their way of getting it, but I think ulterior motives might be a little bit.
I wonder what the ulterior motives could be.
Well, he loves Chicago.
Is it Kroenke type ulterior motives? Is that what we're talking?
I think maybe that's what they're talking about. Sandwich Man.
I don't think we give. Let me just talk to this particular person that used the chat room, and we want you to use the chat room all the time. But I just don't think that we give the Cardinals enough blame or credit for just not spending money effectively. They have been really incompetent in terms of efficiently spending money. It's not ulterior motives, it's incompetence. And when you give contracts out like they have, when you give the Dexter Fowler contract and you have to trade him and pay somebody to take the rest of his contract off your hands, when you give the Mike Leake contract like the Cardinals did and pay the Mariners to take his money, when you give Andrew Miller a big contract and receive virtually nothing in return, when you give Brett Cecil a big contract, when you give Matt Carpenter a big contract and those guys don't perform, I think it's more an inability to properly evaluate what a player is going to do for you than it is ulterior motives and saying, well, yeah, we're trying to lose. I don't think the Cardinals are trying to lose. I just don't think they've been very good at identifying players to help them win.
Can I get really nerdy for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there are two things that people should Google in this conversation right now. I'm going to teach it to you right now. They're called razors, and then they're not for shaving your face. They're philosophical axioms, Randy. And there's two things. You have Occam's razor, which is the simplest answer is most likely the correct one. Very useful for a lot of things. And the easy way to know that one is if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras.
Horses.
Better chance there's horses around you, not zebras, when you're living here in St. Louis. And the other one is Hanlon's razor, which is never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Which is, in other words, yeah, you might not like the moves, but they're not doing it because they're evil. They're doing it because they made mistakes, and sometimes you were bad at your job. Sometimes you're not good at your job, I should say. I'm not saying that they were. I'm just saying that there's a lot of things that can be explained in this world by people made mistakes, people made a decision that wasn't the optimal one, not because they're malicious or trying to screw you over.
Yep.
That's just the way the world works.
Hey, how about our buddy Hockey Dad Don? He's fabulous, and he says, hey guys, just curious what you think. I was reflecting on the previous baseball season and how unreal Shohei Ohtani's 50-50 season was. But was it more unreal than Ronald Acuna Jr.'s 40-60 season? I think that's a great question.
Yes.
And neither of them have been done previously. That's a great question. I would say that Ohtani's was because we have this otherworldly expectation of Ohtani. He was dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure because of the $700 million contract. And he was doing it for a team where when they spent the $700 million, it was, okay, we're spending this money on you so that you can get us to the World Series and we can win it because we haven't won it in a real season since 1988. With Acuna, he was able just to kind of sneak up on you. I don't think the expectation for the 40-60 was there, and it was an unreal season, no doubt about it.
I look at it from a different perspective, which is that you think about statistical like radicals and extremes in baseball, which is guys have styles. You're either a thumper or you're a contact and base stealing guy. And so I guess for me, it's like hitting 40 home runs. We've seen a lot of guys do it, but stealing 60 bases just seemed like it's you only see guys who are fast do that. You don't ever see a thumper steal 60 bases. We were talking about Kyle Tucker earlier. When he had 30 2 years ago, I was like, oh my God, Kyle Tucker had 30 stolen bases. It seemed like a huge number to me. So a guy getting to that 60 steal mount is impressive, but for me, it's getting to both 50 steals and 50 home runs. Being a thumper who can still run to the level of 50 and 50, for some reason, to me, that one just seems more like a statistical anomaly just because of the style of baseball. It's kind of like in basketball when like somebody gets like 20 rebounds and 20 assists. It's like those things seem so opposed with how you do them on the field. How are you doing both of them to that level?
Here's a couple of ways for us to look at this, Hockey Dad Don, and thank you very much for the super chat, by the way. We see 40 home run seasons a lot.
Yeah.
We see 60 stolen base seasons, pretty much. We don't see many 50 home run seasons.
Yes.
And then to add that to a 50 stolen base season is incredible. And then the other thing, Acuna got there. I don't remember how Acuna got to 40 home runs or 60 steals. I remember Shohei's 3 home run game and 10 RBI game, how he got to the 50 home runs. He's a more spectacular performer.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And yeah, just that 50 number on both things just seems so incredible to me. And I don't know, just think about the math. You take away 50 hits, you're not on base to steal at all there. I know Acuna did it 40 times, but still, it's unbelievable to me. The fact that we were able to see both of them in such a short period of time, it's one of those things where as you're watching it, to your point, as you're watching it, I don't think we do a good enough job of being like, okay, I'm watching baseball history. But 10 years later, you're going to be like, I was there. I got to see that. It's one of those things I think as St. Louisans, and I don't know how often you do that or people out there do it. It happens to me all the time. Almost every time I see Albert Pujols like get brought up on TV, I'll have this moment where I'll go, I got to sit there and watch the greatest right-handed hitter maybe ever for my entire childhood, like my entire formative baseball watching years. And in the moment, I did not appreciate it enough, but I get to sit back and appreciate the nostalgia of it, and it hits me every time like a hammer. And the fact that we got to watch both of those seasons happen, unbelievable.
And Joe Rod is going to chime in here as well. But I can tell you this, because that was my birthday weekend when the Dodgers were in town, and I got tickets in May so that I could see Shohei Ohtani play. It was he was a guy, and here I am. I've seen a lot of baseball, but I'd seen him play before when he was with the Angels. But I wanted to see Shohei Ohtani play baseball, so I bought tickets so that I could be at that game on August 17th.
No, Rock, to your point with Albert, growing up and getting to watch that. The coolest thing for me, and I've talked about this before, is that the year he came back is that he was good. Yeah. And I was able to take my kid to games. And it's one of those moments where you can say, I got to watch him grow up, and you got to see the end of the career where it still lived up to the hype. Like, he was in his 40s, but he still put on one heck of a show that final year to where, you still wore the Pujols jersey to games if you still had it, if you didn't burn it when he went to Los Angeles. But when they made it to the playoffs that year, he asked for if he could get a Pujols jersey for those playoff games. And it was quickest yes ever. Like, yep, absolutely. You can have one of those.
Yeah, he was, and especially in that last year, because as it's happening, sure, you take it all in and you appreciate it. But then when he's approaching 700 home runs, and that's kind of like Ohtani last year, approaching 50-50, it's just different because it's historical.
God, we're so bad at it. And I'm trying to be better at it. And it's just, there's so many, like, I think that because everything's passing by and you're just thinking, let's get to the next day. And I think that's the mindset you have in life. Is there's something we all have in life that we're looking forward to a month from now, whether it be a trip or something along those lines. Maybe a show you like is finally coming out with its new season. We all have those things, and so these moments go by so fast, and you don't remember them. And I think one of the bad things about technology is that in the moment we're bad at remembering things. We've gotten worse at that, but because of technology, I can go back now and I can relive every single moment that might have gone too fast, and take advantage of the fact, because technology sucks now, and the world's not much better. So take advantage of the fact that there are some bright spots, and getting to watch these guys like this, I mean, it's incredible. Eric Cleveland, how much does throwing over rule and larger bases diminish the 50-50, 40-60 thing? Well, if teams were actually more aggressive and stole, like the rules changed it that drastically, I'd be with you on that one, but I just don't feel like teams have 100% embraced that.
No, and here's the thing. Aaron Judge hit 58 home runs, but he only stole 10. Anthony Santander hit 44 home runs, but he stole 2. On the other end of the spectrum, Ellie De La Cruz hit 67 home runs, or stole 67 bases, but he only hit 25 home runs. Ohtani hit 54 home runs. So I don't think, because we're playing on a level playing field here, nobody else is doing close to what Ohtani did, except for Acuna the year before, and obviously he was hurt last year.
I want the rules to work, and I want there to be more stolen bases. I think it's so much fun. I think that leagues changing rules and trying to juice the system is a good thing to do. And baseball, I think, has found a good level where the analytical side of things is pushing home runs to a crazy point. And then you change the rules and the physical way the game is played to accentuate a different aspect of it. I think that's what a league is supposed to do. And they have best of both worlds play into it.
And Joe D says...
Jody?
Joe DiMaggio, listening.
Okay.
That's why I hate changing baseball's rules. It was the one sport you could compare players in different eras, given some context. No more ghost man and extras.
How many runs is that a year?
Right.
Like 4?
Yeah. And, with the bases and things like that. But here's the fact of the matter. I mean, for a while, the NBA outlawed the zone defense, right? Or basketball did. Football, how different are the rules now than even the greatest show on turf? The fact that you can't touch a receiver. There's a reason that people are throwing the ball as much as they are now. It's not because the rules haven't changed and the game's gotten more sophisticated. It's because the rules, they want teams to throw the ball more. That's why it used to be that the precedent was Dan Marino throwing 48 touchdown passes. Now you've got a guy who threw 60 touchdown passes in a season. And by the way, just same thing with hockey. You can't compare what happened with Wayne Gretzky in the 80s and then and what the Devils did in the 90s with the neutral zone trap to what's being done right now in hockey.
Or just the Gretzky, because of what Gretzky forced people to do, which is he forced goalies to develop the butterfly.
Right. Yep.
Or just baseball is crazy to me to say that, because there's a 15-year span in the sport from the late 80s to the early 2000s where we just throw guys' careers completely out into the trash because we're not sure if they cheated the game wholly and completely because of steroid use. There's eras in the game where the pitchers are at a different height of the mound and they had to change the height of the mound because pitchers became so dominant. So you're not wrong. Like baseball has this purity aspect to it, but at the same time, there are a lot of eras within baseball where the numbers get really screwy and have been fudged with. And I don't think baseball's that sport anymore, mainly because the 90s happened.
Right. But and in the 90s and early 2000s, most of the guys were still playing on a level playing field. So we can, the writers can keep people like Bonds and McGuire and Sosa out of the Hall of Fame, but they were still hitting more home runs than the other guys that were taking steroids, right?
That's very true. And also, again, I think the one thing we always forget about in that discussion is, yes, there were a lot of hitters who were juicing to hit home runs and get more out of their workouts. But there's also a ton of pitchers who were also juicing at the exact same levels for similar reasons. And doesn't that kind of even things out a little bit? Like if a juice pitcher is going up against a juice hitter, are you that bothered by it?
No.
It was entertaining baseball. But so that's my thing about the eras. I think every game has that issue. I think the point of a sport is to be entertaining. You can act like the point is to continue to keep the sanctity of the game from 1960. The point of the game is to be entertaining. And I think baseball, I don't think manipulating the game to be its best is a bad thing. I think the NFL did it, and they've taken off over the last 20 years.
I want to go back to football for 1 second. The all-time leaders in passing yards per game, the number one guy that played before the turn of the century, the preponderance of his career before the turn of the century, was Dan Marino. He's at number 18. The other 17 have played since 2000. Kurt played his first year in 99, and he's up there at number 12 all time. But the other ones, it's Mahomes, Breeze, Burrow, Luck, Peyton Manning, Stafford, Ryan, Herbert, Brady, Cousins, Goff, Warner, Phillip Rivers, Prescott, Roethlisberger, Palmer, Rodgers. Then you've got Marino, who played from 1983 to 1999. Then the next guy that played the most of his career before the turn of the century was Brett Favre at number 24.
Wow.
So that's how much the game has changed. You can't compare eras, and that's the same thing we're talking about with baseball, with the rules changes.
I don't think baseball is sacred in that
No.
in that fact
Well,
anymore.
and it's not just rules, by the way, it's philosophy, because Bob Gibson would on a regular basis throw 300 innings a year. Now it takes 2 starters on a team generally to get to 300 innings in a year.
And I get why people are bothered by it. I think that this idea that there's a subjective, moral, correct way to play baseball, and for baseball to be, I think that's probably an odd argument to have. It's not what you wanted when you were a kid. It's not what baseball was when you were a kid, and therefore you're mad because that's how baseball is so perfectly connected to the nostalgia of childhood. I am like, football and basketball took over my life when I was a teenager, but that doesn't mean that there is something like built into my brain about a steel radio on the windowsill on a summer day. Like that is hardwired into my brain that it makes me feel something. And that's how this entire city is. And so I understand why people are bothered.
Samuel Howe, I love you, buddy, because you're just like me. Forward pass is illegal. And in parentheses, purist. Yeah, we are. We're purists. I love that.
Speaking of forward pass, by the way, I'm gonna transition us here. Where was the first forward pass ever thrown in football?
St. Louis University.
You're right, and they're playing in the NIT today, Randy. They're facing off against Arkansas State. The Billikens are going for their first postseason win since 2014 as they face off against Arkansas State tonight. Obviously, a last chance to see Gibson Jimerson, Isaiah Swope, and Kobe Johnson. But hopefully see something nice from the Billikens tonight. I'm happy they accepted the NIT invite. I want to see more from this group.
I made a bet over under for the Billikens 76.5.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good bet.
I went over. I took the over.
I like the over on that one. Maybe a little risky just because it was revealed by Josh Schertz that Robbie Avila has been dealing with knee tendonitis. I believe he said in both of his knees. He has been wearing a brace, or a sleeve, I should say, on his right knee since about mid-January. So they want to play, and if they weren't going to play, if they weren't trying to win, which is exactly what Josh said, this isn't some like exploratory thing so they can play Dylan Warlick 30 minutes and things like that. This is they want to win games, and I think it's partially because guys like Amari McCautry are on a strong roll, and you want to keep building that with the freshmen, but they want to win games, so I think you will see Gibson, Swope, and Avila come out and try to show out, and so I think the over on that's a smart play.
We want you to be with us every day, but we also especially want you to join us this week on Friday because management has told us we're going to have a special guest contributor.
Okay.
That's all they're telling us is we're going to have a special guest contributor. Brooke will be back, and we're looking forward to finding out who it is.
I got sent this last night. This was not for today. This was not like about me today. I thought,
oh no.
See, Brooke didn't show up today, and I was like, oh, this whole mystery thing wasn't about me. We're not like putting this out. Like, who's going to be the mystery? Oh, Rocchio jumps out from behind the desk. That's not what this is about.
No,
okay,
no,
fine. I guess we have a big name coming.
Yeah, bigger.
Yeah, you'll see Friday.
All right, we're looking
Friday,
forward to it. Yep.
All right.
Thanks
go.
for sitting in for Matthew, Joe Rod. Great job. And Matthew, thanks for sitting in for Brooke.
Sorry, everybody else.
Oh, no, you were fantastic. And we appreciate you being a part of the Randy Karraker Show featuring Brooke Grimsley and with Matthew Rocchio. We had a lot of fun today. And don't forget Cards Hub 365 coming up after the Cardinals and the Marlins. And then we've got Blues postgame tonight after the Blues and the Predators. So all of your sports needs filled right here at Sports Hub STL. And we will see you tomorrow at 10.